Assalamu alaikum, guys. How's it going? Great stuff. So thank you for, the volunteers that I dragged in here. Thank you for coming. It's great to see you all. And the topic of this workshop is dealing with a pain no one can see, and it's absolutely very important. And of course, it's really good to have volunteers. And here right now, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And it's a good time for you guys also to do some personal reflection if needed, right? So many of us have dealt with the loss of something or someone we loved. And some even have to seek professional help, right? Unfortunately, in our communities, we don't really encourage a lot of that. There's been a recent trend of encouragement over the past few years for that, and alhamdulillah, it is getting better. So we want to continue that trend, inshallah. So with that in mind, we have two folks that will help. That will help answer some questions and that have little pieces of discussion to start us off with. So to my nearest right, I have Asmaa Hussein, and she's the author of A Temporary Gift, Reflections on Love, Loss, and Healings. It's a gripping memoir about widowhood, and she's authored several children's books, and is the creator of www.ruqayyabookshelf.com. So it's a website about the Islamic parenting experience, and Asmaa was born and raised in Toronto. And that's where she's currently living there with her family. And then to my furthest right, we have Monique Best, and she's been doing community work for the French Public School Board over the last 4 years now, and particularly with immigrant families. And she mashallah, is a PhD graduate from Université de Sherbrooke with a thesis on interreligious perceptions in Quebec. And she's converted to Islam, mashallah, over 20 years now, and feels blessed to have a supportive family. So right before we start, each speaker will have a short discussion or short introduction, and we'll speak a little bit. Afterwards, we'll have a full Q&A. So if you guys want to write some questions down, there's volunteers around, and if you want to come, just raise your hand, and they're fairly open to questions. So nothing really is off the table as long as you keep it in alignment with the topic. And I'll pass it on to Asmaa. Thank you.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Thank you for coming. We were just saying that it's hard to compete with Sheikh Naveed in the main session, but alhamdulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So there are three kinds of worshipers in this world. There's the person who only worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they're in times of difficulty and they finally realize that they need Him. And there are people who only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of ease and plenty. And then when something bad happens to them, they say, why is Allah doing this to me? And they lose hope. And both of these are mentioned in the Quran. And then the third type of worshiper is someone who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in both times of ease and hardship. And in a hadith that many of us know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, how wonderful is the affair of the believer, for his affairs are all good, and this applies to no one but the believer. If something good happens to him, he's thankful for it, and that is good for him. And if something bad happens to him, he bears it with patience, and that is good for him. So of course, every believer's goal should be to be this type of worshiper who is able to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of ease and hardship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient, who when disaster strikes them say, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return. So of course it's not really a matter of if we're going to be tested, rather it's a matter of when we're going to be tested and how are we going to respond to that test. So whether you face a loss of loved ones or your wealth, your job, your health, there's certain things that you really need to hang on to and keep in mind in order to create an atmosphere of emotional and spiritual resilience. And so I've come up with 6 key components to creating this environment, and we can discuss more on this because of course this is not an exhaustive list. So the first is accepting your humanness. A lot of our cultures don't acknowledge the validity of emotions. We're taught from a young age that some emotions are good and acceptable to be expressed, and other emotions are maybe not so good, and we should not express them. So instead of learning how to accept our emotions and deal with them, we're taught to bury them. We're taught to just put them out of our minds. But we're not emotionless beings, and we were never meant to be that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us to be emotionless beings, emotionless. So despite what this culture dictates, and alhamdulillah, it's changing. You know, it's changing with our generation and the younger generation. We experience very intense emotional states. You know, we have the potential to accomplish great things and to reach great spiritual heights, if you want to say that. But we're also susceptible to pain and anger and fear and sadness and all of those emotions as well. And we have to accept that feeling these things isn't a form of spiritual weakness or like a flaw in our character. It's just a reality of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. And one of my personal favorite examples of this is the story of Maryam alayhi salam. When she was in labor with Isa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and the pains of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She said, oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten. So she wished that she was dead. You know, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't respond to her by saying, be more patient, don't wish for death. It was said to her out of a great mercy, do not grieve. Your Lord has provided beneath you a stream, and shake towards you the trunk of the palm tree. It will drop upon you ripe, fresh dates. So eat and drink and be contented. So we can see how merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in this example, and especially to show us such a human and authentic example of a woman who is in so much pain that she actually wished for death. And this isn't just any woman. This is Maryam alayhi salam, who was the best woman of humankind in history, past, present, future. This is the best woman that we're talking about. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demonstrates to us how He responded with assurance and comfort, saying, do not grieve. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and He understands that we also have weaknesses, and we're going to go through these periods in our lives where we're going to realize just how flawed and imperfect we are. And even the greatest men and women in history have had moments where they grieve just as we do, and they feel with just as much intensity and emotion as we do. And yes, they even said and did things that they regretted in times of pain. So even if you come to a point where you do or say something that you regret, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving. And as long as you're alive, that door of repentance is never closed. You still have the chance to redeem yourself and to reclaim the patience that you thought that you lost. But it's important to accept that you're human, you know, and it's a strange thing to say you accept you're human, because we are human, but we want to push away the fact that we are. And it's only when we accept this can we really work on bettering ourselves. And the second key is using the intensity of your emotion excuse me, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. So once you accept your humanness and you accept that you're going to feel these emotions and you don't treat them as if they're this poisonous thing that's going to kill you, you can begin to understand that the intensity of your emotion can actually help you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better and in a more fulfilling way. And there are so many examples of this in our history, and there's not enough time to go into them. But of course, my favorite is the story of Prophet Yusuf and Yaqub. It's a very well-known story. Prophet Yaqub said, I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah. So when you're experiencing sadness and grief, you can sort of take that characteristic of his and complain of your sadness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He never denied his sadness. Excuse me. I'm talking too much. So he never denied his sadness or grief. He never tried to push it away or pretend that he was fine. Instead, he used his pain to foster that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and foster the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every state we find ourselves in, whether it's happy or sad or excited or angry or sad, I already said sad, but excuse me, we can use every single circumstance to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. But the key here, though, is that we have to be self-aware, which means we have to be checked into our emotions. And if we don't accept our humanness, and we don't acknowledge that we're feeling these emotions, we can never be self-aware, we can never use these emotions to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. The third key is connecting with the Quran. And we all know this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. And in a different verse, O mankind, there has come to you instruction from your Lord and healing for what is in the chests, and guidance and mercy for the believers. So a lot of us, when we're going through something difficult, we turn to our close circle of friends or our family members, or unfortunately even social media, to sort of numb us a little bit. But when we do that, when we do that only, and we don't ever turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or turn to the Quran, we're essentially saying that the Quran is something theoretical that we want to follow, but we're not really going to practice it. We're not going to use it in our daily lives. But the Quran needs to be an integral part of our lives, and that's how we build spiritual and emotional resilience. It's just that, as Ibn Taymiyyah says, he has this amazing quote, "I have not seen anything that nourishes the mind and soul, preserves the body, and secures happiness more than continuous reading and contemplation of the Book of Allah." The fourth key is counting your blessings. Regardless of what circumstance you're in, regardless of how difficult you have it, whether you've lost somebody or something, you are still incredibly blessed. And that's the reality. If you've lost your health, maybe you have wealth to help other people. If you've lost somebody that you love, perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you strength and health to do something greater with your life. And it's hard to see, like right at that moment where you're going through something really difficult, it's hard to see the glass as half full or silver lining or whatnot. I'm sorry, guys. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, but perhaps you hate a thing and it's good for you, and perhaps you love a thing and it's bad for you, and Allah knows while you know not. So even the difficulty itself that's causing you so much pain, even that in and of itself could be a blessing, but we just don't know it. So it's important for your state of mind to consciously and thoroughly remember the blessings and the favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Whether that's writing in a gratitude journal every day or incorporating it somehow into your daily routine where you recognize what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. So not only does this put difficult situations into perspective, but it also does three things. So your overall happiness will increase, and research has shown this. You're rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your gratitude to Him. So just acknowledging His favors is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for. And the third is the more grateful you are, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you. And Allah says, and remember your Lord caused to be declared publicly. If you are grateful, I will add more favors to you, unto you, excuse me. Sorry guys, I'm not used to talking so much. And the fifth key, I'm not going to go too deeply into this one because I'm going to talk about it a little bit in my main session at 4:30. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a hadith Qudsi, I am as my servant thinks of me. So we have to do some serious introspection. Are we in a place where we trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking care of us and protecting us, or are we being impatient? Are we even assuming that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or assuming bad things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bad intentions? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, he who fears Allah and is patient, then indeed Allah does not allow to be lost the reward of those who do good. And the final point, and then I'm going to pass it over to Monique, is seeking help. So sometimes people think that patience means keeping all your difficulties to yourself. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't created us in a vacuum. He created us in a family, in a community, in a place where we can seek help from people. And not only that, but your mind and body are an amana, a trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. So knowing when to seek help to preserve those things is actually a way of honoring that trust from Him. So these are just a few of the things that I've personally found to be necessary in the healing process and journeying through life in a way that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm going to pass it over to Monique now, who's going to talk a little bit more about that last point. Jazakumullah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum. We're so happy that there's so many of you here today, so thanks for coming. So I'm here today as a volunteer for Partners for Mental Health, which is an organization. Is this better? I have to be closer. Okay. So I'm here as a volunteer today, not as a PhD graduate. I'm a volunteer with Partners for Mental Health. My brother had some issues many years back, and so for me it was important to find some information and knowing how to deal with this. It's not only people who have mental health issues that need to seek knowledge and be informed, it's also the people that are surrounding the people who may have some health issues. So today, seeking help, as Asma said, is a key for my well-being. There are two ways of looking at seeking help. You could think about seeking help in terms of professional help, and that's not what I'm talking about here today. What I'm talking about is more in terms of helping yourself. Or using information and prevention as a method of taking care of your health and your mental health. So what makes people feel good? Yes? People being there for you? Your surroundings can affect how you feel, whether good or bad, yes? Go ahead. Going for a walk, exercise, makes you feel good, yes? Being satisfied makes you feel good, yes, it's a great feeling. One more, sorry? Family, yes. Having a family, that's excellent. So different things make us feel good. I'd love to hear from all of you. So I gave examples here. Exercising came up. Nobody mentioned reading the Quran. That can make you feel good sometimes. Shopping is a great one for me. It always makes me feel good. So a person's general state of well-being is determined by many factors, and two of them are your physical health and your mental health. So in order to feel good, when you're ill, when you're sick, just having a cold, you feel terrible, right? So it's the same with your mental health. When you're not in your top shape, well, you don't feel good also. Behaviors that can promote physical well-being. So you are what you eat. What you eat obviously is going to affect your physical well-being. Any other ideas? I like to have the audience participate when I'm in front. Thanks. Your sleep, yes. Anything else? Any other ideas? McDonald's, does it promote your physical well-being? It fills your tummy. I'm not sure if it's healthy, but it sustains you, gives you energy to go on. Anybody else? Exercising, yes, contributes to good physical health. One more. Stress management, yes, knowing how to, yes, it will contribute because stress, it's kind of in both with the mental and the physical, right? If you're stressed, it can bring on other physical ailments and illnesses. Yes, that's true. Okay, last one. Sleep, yes. If you don't sleep enough, it's going to affect your physical well-being. You're not going to be able to perform so well the next day. And behaviors that promote mental well-being, what can you do to feel good about yourself and play an active role and be engaged into having good mental health? Your frame of mind, being positive about things, yes?
Go to McDonald's?
Yeah, I guess, because if it's satisfying for you, yeah, it'll make you feel good.
Helping others?
Helping others, that's always a good one. It's win-win situation. One more? Yes, talking or doing something for somebody else. Thanks. So another one that I've put here that relates to our religion that I like is Iqra. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. So which means read. And we could look at it in terms of reading the Quran can make you feel good. It doesn't have the same effect on everybody. Everybody's not at the same faith level, and some people feel immensely good when they read the Quran. Other people maybe are not quite there yet, and maybe it's something else that can work for them. And we pray, inshallah, that one day you'll get to that level. But if you think about reading also, well, reading and seeking knowledge in a general sense is something that can contribute to your well-being just as much as your physical well-being as your mental well-being. So if you're reading, you're informing yourself, you're being proactive, you read about what's good for your physical health, you try to implement what you can. Same with mental health. There's a lot of resources out there and things and tricks of things you can do to improve on your mental health and avoid mental illness if possible. So today, I'm not going to go into this one right now because I don't want to take too much time. The reason I'm here today, like I said, I'm a volunteer for Partners for Mental Health, and they have a campaign called Right By You. I'll try to get back to my notes. So the Right by You campaign, it was created by Partners for Mental Health to improve mental health and prevent suicide among youth. So the idea is that this website, it's a resource that can help in preventing the need to seek help by empowering parents or whoever is reading the website with tools that facilitate and encourage conversations with either your youth or with your family members, depending on who's reading. I think the target was for parents, to give tools for parents on how to talk with their youth. When their youth become in the teenage years, it can be sometimes difficult to talk and keep the communication open. So I found it was very useful. I would have liked to have it 5 years back, but I think there's a lot of interesting tools and resources and ideas as to how to start a conversation with your kids about just anything, first of all, because it's hard enough to talk about mental health, but if you don't talk on an everyday basis about the ins and outs of life, how are you going to attack the tougher conversations? So I have a booth here today. I hope I'll be here till 9. I can't guarantee it. I'm alone. We weren't able to find a second volunteer. So if you have any questions, I'll also have some documents that you can find on the website. I've downloaded them on my computer because we don't have Wi-Fi here today. I would have liked for you to be able to navigate the website and see for yourself what a great tool it is. But you can come and see me and we can chat some more if you have some questions. And I think I'm over my 5 minutes. Thank you very much for listening.
So, yeah, Wi-Fi is super expensive here. It's like $11.95 an hour. That's pretty terrible. So now to the second portion of today. We'll open up the floor for questions. So obviously everybody's encouraged to raise their hand. If you don't feel super comfortable saying your question out loud, we have 2 volunteers that'll be coming around with some pens and papers. So please, you're encouraged to participate, and we definitely want to hear any questions that you may have. So we'll give it a few moments for the volunteers to distribute the papers. And in the meantime, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to address? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
So how do you overcome the stigma surrounding mental illness because there is a lot of negative comments around talking about it?
So the question was how to overcome stigma over mental illness because there's a lot of just a negative view on it?
Do what I'm doing today, talking about it. It all starts there. The more we talk about it, the more people are used to hearing about it, the less stigma there's going to be. Inform yourselves, read a lot. It's very empowering to know what's out there and be able, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but sometimes all people need is somebody to listen. So, yeah, I would say getting in contact with different organizations and volunteering your time to be able to talk about mental health. They share resources with you to be able to go into your communities or in your school. You could even do a small presentation with your friends. So yeah, talking about it.
Asmaa, anything to add there?
Sure. No, that was perfect. That's good.
Great. Any other questions? Hands. Okay, so we do have some sticky notes going around. So in the meantime, I think you touched on a really important point, Monique, which is, I guess, the families that are affected by anybody who's going through anything. And you mentioned the website. Would you be able to share a few, I guess, pearls of wisdom from the website in terms of, advice for families on how to deal with these things, or things that you found particularly interesting when you went through it?
Yeah, these are facts. I'll go here. This is the main part. This here that you can see is the main part of the website, where there's 3 basic things that parents can do. They can take a questionnaire, and depending on the answers, you will be directed to either resources or tools that can help you improve upon what you know about mental health or not. Then there's the third one in orange. The second one in orange is discover the best time and place to talk with your kids. So they give you tips about that. I found a good one for my family is, I don't know if you guys know about it, is talking when you're in the car. When you're not face-to-face with your child, it seems to be a better time to talk. There's less pressure, but each child is different. Somebody disagrees. Would you like to speak up?
For
Yes. No, I hear what you're saying, but then that's a different battle. That's about trying to set boundaries as to when. Can you give me 5 minutes without your earphones? Put the timer on. You got 5 minutes. And then the last part is about, sorry, I need my glasses, is about asking the right questions. So the blue zone, when you click there, it's divided, I believe, in 6 different types of questions you can ask. So it's not just questions about mental health, it's just general questions that you wouldn't have thought of. And they're not yes/no answers, they're non-judgmental questions, they're just ideas to start a conversation with your youth. And I've not memorized them. If you come see me at the booth after, I've got them downloaded and you can look them over. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything? You're good? Okay,
Oh, here's an example. I'll just leave it on as we keep talking.
and I think we have a few questions. Great.
Try to get one that's not about mental health.
A lot of these are about mental health taboos. Can I use this?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, you go with that.
So there's a question, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer it, but the question is how do you talk to kids about death since there was a sudden death in the family? So I think it depends on how old the child is and whether they have a grasp of what death means, the finality of death, because younger kids don't really have that, they don't have that grasp. They don't know what death really is. I talked to my daughter about it because her father passed away when she was just a baby. So she doesn't remember, she doesn't understand what death is, right? But I talk about death in a very non-scary way, that we're going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He created us. We're going to return to Him. Inshallah, if we do our best in this world, we're going to go to Jannah, and all the things that happen in Jannah and the wonderful things. So to her, it's not a scary thing. And just because of my situation, I've had to talk about it so that she understands. But for older kids, it might be a little bit more difficult. So I would actually recommend, if the child is older, like 12, 13 and up, to buy my book for them. And this isn't like advertising for my book, but because I've had kids that age read the book and they've really benefited from it. It's going to be in the bazaar, I think, at the iLEAD booth. It's called A Temporary Gift. Brother Mahmoud mentioned it. So yeah, I would say do that. I wish I had more to say. Would you like to add anything?
I think being honest is, like you said, it's part of life. Death is part of life. And like you said also, it depends on what age this happens. And I think that if you have these conversations with your kids when they're younger, it's not easier, but I think it's easier than if you never talk about it and all of a sudden there's a death. How are you going to bring it up if you've never even talked about it before? It's the same, I don't want to compare it, but a little bit like mental health. If you never talk about it, well, when it's going to happen in the family, well, it's going to be like, how do you talk about it? How do you bring it up? How are you brave enough to have that discussion? So I don't think there are any taboo subjects with your kids. Talk about everything.
So there's a question here. What preemptive measures can we take to avoid mental illness? Would you like to address that one?
A lot of the reading that I've done prior to this presentation, I'll just keep the question close to me just in case. Depending on the origin of mental illness, some of it you can't prevent. It's going to happen. And like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. But sometimes a mental illness can come from poor mental health. And that's what we talked about earlier. What can you do to help have good mental health? And that's what you have to ensure that you have in your life, hopefully on a daily basis, little things that bring you pleasure and make you feel good. Whether it was a young child over there mentioned your family, what makes you feel good, and hopefully that is halal. These are the things that you can keep in your life to avoid certain mental illnesses. I can't say that it will prevent everything. I don't know if the person who asked the question feels that I've answered it correctly or if they want to respond to what I said.
Please go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
What would you like to say to everybody in the audience here based on what they're saying in their lectures? How did you react? How do you feel with what's your reality? Well, do you agree with what they're saying in those lectures? Because from what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that you're not quite sure that what they're saying is true. Your reality, your experience, the people you know, it's real. I don't either. I agree with you. It is real. And like everybody feels sad at some point in their life. And that's normal, and most likely it will come and it will pass. And you may have many, many other moments of sadness and it will pass. But depression is beyond sadness. It's not the same thing. It's a diagnosed illness. The same as you can diagnose that somebody has cancer, you can diagnose that somebody has depression.
So there's a question here, how do you maintain good character with an angry... Okay, I thought this was how do you maintain good character when you're angry, but I think it's something different. I can't read the end. Be a parent who's lashing out?
With angry lashing parents. With angry
Lashing parents, yeah. This is tough. I would say every case is different, and it depends how angry they get. It depends how they react when angry. It's a case-by-case basis, because I don't want to say just be patient through it and just remove yourself from the situation if the situation is serious and it constitutes abuse, right? So this is completely a case-by-case basis, I would say. But if it's something like, just they're angry, but it doesn't cross the line into being abusive, I would say try to stay silent and remove yourself from the situation until they calm down. And it's really tough and not just with a parent, but with anybody who's angry, to react to them in a way that's not going to make them more angry. That's reality, right? It's so funny that there's actually a hadith in front of me. It's not funny, but the hadith is when the Prophet instructed people when they're angry to say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem." You seek refuge with Allah from the shaitan. But it's funny because when someone's angry and then you come and tell them in their face, say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem," like literally 100% of the time it's going to make them more angry. So it's all about having the wisdom to apply the sunnah, right? So maybe when your parent or whoever it is calms down, you can approach them and have a conversation. I felt that you were being, or I felt that the amount of anger, I don't know, we can talk, if whoever wrote this question can come talk to me or Monique, and we can talk about it further. But I would say try your best to remain calm, because anything that you say when someone's angry is always going to make them angrier. So try to remain calm and remove yourself from the situation when you can. Do we have more time?
We'll leave it to one last question.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
These are two new ones.
Okay, so the last question sort of is very similar to a previous one. How do you address mental health to parents' cultures that believe that it's a taboo or a myth? So Monique, I believe you wanted to handle this one.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. They're all tough questions. I think it's going to come down to what I said earlier, is being proactive, seeking knowledge, trying to find the best times to have these discussions with your parents. If they're not open to it, I agree, there's not much you can do. You can leave brochures hanging around the house, maybe. But it's true. It's a reality. They come from a different culture. And I can understand how it could be hard for youth, because you're like a split culture. You have your parents' culture plus the one from the new country. So it is very difficult to bring up stuff, especially when you can have a parent that can be closed-minded and think they know everything and that you can't bring anything to the table. And that's where this campaign is great, but if the parents don't go to it and don't go check out the resources, it's unfortunate. So I think, and it comes down to what, there was a question about what can we do, and I said, let's talk about it. The more you talk about it, the more you bring it to your community. Go see your imam. I found this great website. I'd like you to talk about it and invite the parents. Do a presentation at the mosque, a live one with the Wi-Fi, and show the parents all the information that's on the website. There's different ways of going about getting a message to your parents than direct. If you think speaking directly doesn't work, you have to think outside the box. You have to think of a way, how can I make my parents be aware of this? Whether it's mental health or any other thing, you got to find a way to keep the communication working. Same as the website here is trying to give tips for parents to keep a communication open with their kids. We got to meet halfway. Kids also have to find a way, and the parents have to find a way.
Great. Asma, did you want to add anything to that?
No.
Great. So, Jazakallah khair to our speakers. That concludes this session. Now, right now, there is a break. There's an overall break. So, I believe if it's okay with you guys, I don't know if you're willing to stay behind a little bit. If anybody has any more personal questions, so they'll be sticking around here, and I believe Sister Monique has a booth as well. I don't know about you, Sister Asma. I believe you have a booth as well. So. I don't
she
know
can come hang out at my booth if she wants to.
So.
I have a talk at 4:30, and then after the talk, I'm going to be at the iLEAD booth.
Okay, perfect.
Do you want to
So Sister Asma has a talk at 4:30, and then after that, she's going to be at the iLEAD booth. So if you have any more questions, catch them at any of those times, and obviously catch their talks. Now, the next workshop is Make Space. It's an open mic feedback for the youth led by Amal Kausar. It's at 1:45. So Jazakumullah khair for coming, everybody, and stick around if you have any questions. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.